Good evening, this is Handlock Steve coming to you on the 21st of May. And here we are. Nigel Farage is surging forward in the polls with the Brexit Party, and we are literally days away from the MEP EU elections coming up on the 23rd to the 26th of May, and that is going to be the topic of the conversation this evening. So grab yourself a seat and pull up a chair, put your feet up, grab a cup of tea, and let's have a discussion about Brexit and populism and why it is surging throughout Europe. And a very warm welcome to all of you who are returning to my channel, and a big shout out to any of your first time visitors. Please, if you enjoy this video, like, comment and subscribe below, and we love it that you are part of this conversation. Nigel Farage, who left the leadership of the UKIP party, the United Kingdom Independence Party, last year, and has basically been focusing on his work as an MEP in the EU, has now formed the Brexit Party, and that was about 5 weeks ago. And in that short amount of time, the Brexit Party has surged to first place in the polls with 34%, and that is more than the Labour and the Conservative Party combined. The Conservative Party has now slipped into relegation status, and it is now questionable whether the Conservative Party will even actually survive into its next election. And you may actually even see, judging by the popularity of Nigel Farage, him become the next Prime Minister of England. And since Nigel Farage has left the UKIP party, really it has just floundered under the leadership of Gerald Batten. It is now trailing, I believe it is second to last in the polls, and it's really been tarred as a racist party, and there has been many incidents now of people being milkshaked. This is where someone throws a milkshake over one of the candidates, or actually bottles and bricks were thrown at one of the candidates, and one of them was also kippered. They throw a whole bunch of fish at the candidate. It really looks like the Brexit Party is going to absolutely clean up here. Now, why are we seeing this sudden shift? Well, a question that is often asked by politicians to the electorate is, do you think that you are any better off now than you were 4 years ago? Well, we have a little bit more than 4 years to judge by. We have something like 40 to 45 years to judge by. So let's take a little look at what has happened in the world in the last 40 years. Well, everyone is in debt throughout the world, whether it's individually or whether it is through their government collectively. Every banking system is on the ropes. They are basically just being pumped up by printed money by the central banking system, and if it weren't for that, they would actually be in a state of collapse. There are people rioting on the streets all over the world, most notably in France with the Yellow Vest, but the Yellow Vest movement is picking up in Britain and in Holland, and also in Canada and Singapore. There are terrorists absolutely everywhere. There is now internal as well as external threats to just about every country in the world. The whole of the Middle East is a basket case. Syria, Libya, Egypt, Lebanon, Yemen, Saudi Arabia. I mean, it is just an absolute disaster. Everyone is fighting everybody. Turkey is fighting northern Syria. The Kurds are in there. Iran is about to have a revolution. We are in a most bizarre situation with our goods purchasing and manufacturing. We are completely dependent in the West for China, Southeast Asia, India, Bangladesh, etc. to be manufacturing all our goods, and they are completely dependent upon us purchasing them. I mean, it is absolutely bizarre that we should have got ourselves in a situation where If one of those countries suddenly has a hiccup, a financial hiccup, or some kind of industrial dispute, or possibly even a pandemic of some kind, what on earth are we going to do? Has anybody thought that through? There is a serious threat of war, actually, in several places in the country, and not least of which is Iran, and also Venezuela. Russia, China and America seem to be circling the wagons down there, and who knows what could tip that off. And North Korea seems to be straying away from the peace treaty, which seems so close just about 4, 5, 6 months ago. Youth unemployment throughout Europe is ranging between 20 and 50%. Now this is absolutely staggering, because this is our next generation, and if those people get disillusioned, you are going to have angry adults, because one of the dreams, of course, of all young people is to find a partner and to raise a family, and you cannot do that if you don't have a job. And so these kids are now hanging out on street corners. They're seeing all kinds of things on their cell phones that are making them angry and jealous, because they just don't have access to any of that stuff, because of course when you're unemployed you don't have any money to spend. So this is a very dangerous and almost explosive situation with the youth unemployment. There is also basically ghettos all over Europe now of angry, frightened and frustrated immigrants. This is not a good situation. There is not enough work for them. If you have 20 to 50% youth unemployment, how on earth are you going to find work for all of these immigrants? And this is just an absolute powder keg waiting to go off. The infrastructure, our roads, our bridges are all at the point of failure. And our successive governments have not spent the time and the money to make sure that our infrastructure is maintained. And one of the things that I have always said is, at the very least, if we had governments that were working for the people, there would be a cross-party infrastructure replacement policy where they all were working from the same page, so our infrastructure would get replaced on a timely basis. Right now, this is another disaster waiting to happen, and all of our municipalities, all of our provinces and all of our federal governments are up to their eyeballs in debt. And of course, the taxpayer is being taxed to the hilt. They cannot afford to come up with more money. So just exactly where is this money going to come from to replace all of this desperately needed infrastructure renewal? No one seems to know the answer to that question. And all the time, we're going on about CO2, and yet our rivers, our oceans, our water, our air and our land continues to be polluted by pesticides, by herbicides, by factory effluent going into our rivers and onto our land. And this is also happening even more so in countries like China and in the third world, as they race towards development to try and copy us, ironically enough. Isn't that wonderful? And why is there such a lack of regulation to get this done? Well, because our governments spend all day bickering over partisan issues, over minor things. We're dealing right now with corruption in the Liberal government in Canada over an SNC-Lavalin scandal. The trying to accuse the Vice Admiral of leaking information where there could have been any one of 72 people. They had no evidence whatsoever, and now they've retracted all of the charges. We have a computer payment system called the Phoenix system, which has cost $5 billion so far, and we can't change over to a new one until we get that one fixed, because you'd be putting corrupt data from one computer system into another. So we're looking at possibly $7 or $8 billion on a payroll computer system, because our government was too arrogant to ask a large company like Amazon or Dell or Microsoft what computer system they use to pay their employees. And so when you add all of this up, it is hardly surprising, that people are frustrated, they're angry, and you have a civil service now that is actively working to basically roadblock people who go in with complaints, who have problems, who have issues, so nothing is getting dealt with. People are angry, people are frustrated, the politicians don't seem to be able to do anything about this whatsoever, and we just look out of our windows and we see things getting worse and worse and worse. And so along comes somebody who points all of this out, like most of these populist leaders, including Nigel Farage, and of course the public go for it.
My friend is from another country and she came in, she was like, can you please explain what everyone is annoyed about with this whole Brexit thing? I said, look, imagine if you and 10 of your friends were in a Burger King, right? And you said, listen, who wants to leave the Burger King? And 6 people were like, we want to leave the Burger King. And then somebody who didn't want to leave the Burger King was like, I'll get us out there. I'll have a word with the manager. I'll get us a deal. It's like, do we need a deal? No, you can't leave without a deal. I'll get a deal. You want to leave? Yeah, I'm going to get us a deal, right? So she goes to talk to the manager. She comes back 2 years later. She's been trying to leave. The door says push. She's pulling that thing. I can't get us out. She goes, great news, I've done us a deal to leave. What's the deal? We've got to pay the manager £40 billion. And then we get to leave. Technically, yes. What do you mean, technically? Well, physically, we'll still be in the Burger King. But if anyone asks you, are you in Burger King, you'll be able to tell them, no, we left.
But there is another very special reason why you're seeing a rise in the populist governments, and I'm going to get back to that. But in the meantime, let's go take a look at these little articles that I have found. Okay, here we go. The Irish Times, a poll surge for Farage's Brexit party sparks panic among Tories and Labour. Support for Tories at European election falls to a third of what the Brexit party is polling. And the same with The Guardian. Support for the Conservatives at the European elections slumps to 11%, less than a third of what the Farage's party is polling. No wonder Theresa May looks like she needs a little sleep, and why they look extremely worried. 11% of the popular vote is a career-ending percentage. This could actually spell the end of the Conservative Party itself. They're polling so low right now. Senior Tory and Labour politicians have issued frantic calls to their voters to back them in next week's European elections after a new poll showed support for Nigel Farage's Brexit party had soared to a level higher than for the two main parties put together. And here we are. Brexit party also continues to gain a lot of traction in the lead up to the European elections. Brexit party 34, Labour 21, Liberal Democrats 12, Conservative 11. And when you couple the Labour and the Liberal Democrats, or the Labour and the Conservative, or the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative, the two parties together cannot beat the Brexit party. And the Conservatives are so low. I mean, they're only barely above the Greens. UKIP is 4, and SNP is 4, and the Independent Change UK group is at 3. On Saturday, Farage was cheered by hundreds of voters at a rally in Houghton-le-Spring near Sunderland as he described the Prime Minister's Brexit deal as like a surrender document of a nation that has been defeated in war.
This is the real problem, colleagues. Why there is such a problem in this crisis? Because member states are reluctant to transfer new sovereignty and powers to the European Union. And we all know that the only way out of this crisis is a new transfer of powers to the European Union and to the European institutions.
There were signs of mounting panic and recriminations in both Tory and Labour ranks as the MPs attempted to belatedly mount a Stop Farage operation. May was accused by senior Conservatives of fueling populism with her indecision over the Brexit issue, whilst Labour politicians urged their backers to come out and vote despite the party's mixed messages on Europe, which are depressing its support. European elections could reveal popularity and chaos of populists. Can traditional centrist dominance survive at European Parliament given the rise of far-right groups since 2014. Never before have I seen national governments so weakened by the forces of populism, said Juncker, who is the former president of Luxembourg. In Hungary, meanwhile, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is running a propaganda campaign against Brussels. It is not unusual to see posters featuring Juncker and Hungarian-American philanthropist George Soros implying the pair is planning to overrun Hungary with refugees. From Time, Italy's Interior Minister leads rally of European nationalist leaders. And here they are, Italian Interior Minister, Deputy Premier and leader of the Italian party Lega, or League, Matteo Salvini, with Marine Le Pen, leader of the French National Front, and Dutch far-right politician Geert Wilders of the PVV party attended a rally of European nationalist parties ahead of the May 23rd to 26th European parliamentary elections at Duomo Square in Milan, in Italy, May 18th, 2019. Italy's anti-migrant Interior Minister Matteo Salvini led a rally of right-wing populist leaders Saturday seeking historic results in next week's European parliamentary elections in their bid to transform European politics. Salvini, the head of Italy's right-wing League party, has positioned himself at the forefront of a growing movement of nationalist leaders seeking to free the European Union's 28 nations from what he called Brussels' illegal occupation. Salvini was joined by 10 other nationalist leaders, including far-right leaders Marine Le Pen of France's National Rally Party and Georg Müthen of the Alternative for Germany Party, the AfD. It was a major tour de force for the expanding movement ahead of the May 23rd to 26th vote that will take place in all 28 EU nations. Still, most of the tens of thousands of supporters that packed the square outside Central Duomo Cathedral in Milan were there for Salvini. League flags filled the square with a smattering of national flags from other nations. Well, of course, they were in Milan. And this from RT.
EU is peace, EU is freedom, EU is solidarity, EU is diversity.
Europe is love, Europe is life. EU Commission takes heat for Orwellian tweet ahead of elections. And there he is, George Orwell, 1984. As Europeans prepare to vote in the EU parliamentary elections, the European Commission has raised some eyebrows with a tweet extolling the virtues of the Union in true George Orwell style. The EU is peace, the EU is freedom, the EU is solidarity, the EU is diversity, the EU is human rights, the EU is opportunities, reads the Commission's tweet posted on Saturday. The message ended with a simple instruction: vote. And of course, it's not peace, it's not freedom. You're being spied on from every direction. The EU is fighting amongst itself like crazy. So there is no solidarity. Britain is leaving. Italy wants to leave. France wants to leave. The EU is diversity. Well, let me know how that's working out for you. The EU is human rights. So this is why you set the police and the army on your own population, who are simply exercising their legal right to demonstrate. The EU is opportunities. With 20 to 50% youth unemployment, I don't think there's much opportunities in Europe except for unemployment and mayhem on the streets. Okay, so the last reason that people are choosing the populist governments over the globalist governments is because, as we mentioned before, a false dichotomy was created. And whenever you look at elections throughout the world, there is usually two major parties. There may be a third party and some fringe parties. But really, when you look at the debates, only the two or the third party is invited to the debates. For example, in the US elections last year, there was 52 presidential candidates. We heard of 3 of them. So when you have a system like that and people are dissatisfied with the Liberals or the Democrats, they don't have anywhere else to turn to. The only other party left is the Populist Party, the Conservative Party. So this is basically, everyone is trapped. And of course it's the same on the other side too. If you feel disillusioned with the Conservative Party or the Populist Party, you really don't have anywhere else to go except to the Liberal or the Democratic Party. And if you want to choose a Socialist Party, I hate to say this because I'm sure they all have valid points, certainly to themselves at least, but if you are going to vote, say for the Green Party, who are holding 1 or 2 seats in the Canadian federal government, it's a throwaway vote. Your vote's not going to do anything. Until we change the political system to proportional representation, where every vote does count, and now that's a whole completely different story. But as it stands right now, if you dislike the Liberals and you're not keen on the Conservatives, and you don't want the Liberals to get back in, if you vote for the NDP or the Green Party or some of the independents, you are actually going to assist the party that you don't want to get in, because it's essentially a wasted vote. And that's the unfortunate thing about the kind of electoral system that we have. And until that changes, fundamentally nothing else is going to change. But in the meantime, we are just going to have to sit and watch and wait to see how all of this plays out. But certainly the populist governments across Europe are looking to absolutely sweep the MEP elections coming up on the 23rd to the 26th of May. And this will be an influential body if they can agree with each other, and of course that is a whole other question in and of itself. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below, and in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we will talk very, very shortly. You take care now. See you. Bye.